summarize what we know about graphing so far. Sine and cosine were very similar, and it's up to you. You don't necessarily have to write this down, but this is what we've done. With sine and cosine, we know the amplitude is the coefficient. Period is 2 pi divided by b, or the coefficient of x. Count by is whatever you get for your period divided by 4 for the 4 quadrants. And interval is 0 less than or equal to your argument less than or equal to 2 pi. Now, tangent and cotangent are a little bit different. The amplitude is still the same. It's not really a true amplitude because we saw yesterday that tangent and cotangent keep going up forever. So it's not a true amplitude as in the higher the graph, but it will help us plot our points. So we're going to do that. But the period changes. Sine and cosine had to go all the way around the circle before they repeated themselves. We saw yesterday that tangent and cotangent repeated faster. So their normal period is pi. So when we're finding the period for tangent and cotangent, we'll do pi divided by the coefficient of x. Count by, we will still do the period divided by 4. The interval is also going to be different. And remember, we had different intervals for tangent and cotangent because we picked intervals so that they would be nice, so that we'd have asymptotes at the end and one smooth graph in between. So for tangent, we will go from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. And for cotangent, we will choose 0 to pi. And again, that's not the only possible interval. That's just an interval that gives us nice values. So that's an easy one to work with, and then we can just put our asymptotes on the ends. All right, otherwise everything else stays the same. Negative in front flips it, adding or subtracting something on the end moves it up or down. So really the only difference with tangent and cotangent is your normal period is pi instead of 2 pi, and we have a different interval for these two. So now let's just practice graphing these. So if I wanted to graph y equals the tangent of 2/3 x. So my amplitude, again, not really a true amplitude, but we're going to use it all the same, is our coefficient on tangent, so that would be 1. Period. How do we find a period for tangent and cotangent? So it would be pi over 2/3. If you did a calculator, 1 over 2/3, so we should get 3 pi over 2. Count by, we do our period, divided by 4 for the 4 quadrants. So we get 3 pi over 8. The interval. This is the one thing we really have to focus on. If we are dealing with tangent, what do we put tangent between?
Negative pi over 2 and then pi over 2.
And inside's just my 2/3. With sine and cosine, I told you you don't have to do an interval if you're not adding or subtracting with your x. And that's still the case, but I find it easier with tangent and cotangent to always do it, because with tangent, since we're not starting at 0, changing the interval or changing the period does impact that starting point as well, so it's just easier for me to always do it here. So we need to divide by 2/3 or multiply by 3/2. So we get negative 3 pi over 4 less than or equal to x less than or equal to positive 3 pi over 4. Okay, I didn't specify that we have to do 2 periods, so we're just doing 1 period here. The 2 periods, same as we've done before, you basically do 1 and then add more points to the end. We are starting our graph at the beginning point of our interval. So my first point is at negative 3 pi over 4. And then you add your count by. So negative 3/4 plus 3/8. So that's negative 3 pi over 8. Plus 3/8 is 0. Plus 3 pi over 8 is 3 pi over 8. Plus 3 pi over 8 is 6 pi over 8, or 3 pi over 4, which is where we said our interval should end. Amplitude, we're using the 1 and negative 1. Okay, the reason we pick tangent is the beginning and ending point will be an asymptote. So we have an asymptote at negative 3 pi over 4 and positive 3 pi over 4. And the center point is going to be 0. So 0, 0 is going to be a point on my graph. And then we just have to think, is tangent increasing or decreasing? Another way to think about that, over here, this represents quadrant 4. And in quadrant 4, tangent is negative. And then it goes into quadrant 1, and tangent is positive in quadrant 1. So it should go negative to positive, so it should be rising. So these other points, we use our amplitude. So at the negative 3 pi over 8 will be at our negative amplitude, or negative 1. Positive 3 pi over 8 would be at our positive amplitude, or the positive 1. On these graphs, please, they have to be curved, and make sure that you are drawing it approaching your asymptote. Okay, I don't want it to just stop like right here. That doesn't show me you understand that it's getting closer to your asymptote. So do make sure it's approaching. If you're having a hard time getting that to happen on your graph, sometimes if you make your points a little bit closer together on the x-axis, that's slightly easier. So it should look something like this. Is that okay with everybody? Let's try it. We're just going to do these until we feel confident with them today. So I want to do negative 1/2 tangent 2x. What is my amplitude?
1/2.
What does the negative do? Period. Normal period for tangent is pi, so you do pi divided by the coefficient of x, so pi over 2. Count by?
Pi over 2 divided by 4.
So we get pi over 8. The interval. It's tangent, so we're going to go from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Solving for x, so I have to divide everything by 2 or multiply by 1/4. So we get negative pi over 4 less than or equal to x less than or equal to positive pi over 4. So first point, negative pi over 4. Plus pi over 8, so this is like negative 2 pi over 8 plus 1 pi over 8 is negative pi over 8. Plus pi over 8 gives me 0. Plus pi over 8 is pi over 8. Plus pi over 8 is 2 pi over 8, or pi over 4. my amplitude is 1/2 here. So my high point would be at positive 1/2, my low point negative 1/2. Make sure when you're drawing these, and there's a couple of people yesterday, I don't know necessarily about your class, but your y-axis, those need to be spaced evenly too. Okay, don't make the top amplitude this big and the bottom a half that big. Make them the same. So we picked this because then the ends are asymptotes. And the center is 0. Tangent is increasing. It goes from negative to positive, but we flipped it. So this one should be falling. So at negative pi/8, we'd be at our positive amplitude, so positive 1/2. Positive pi/8, we're at our negative amplitude, negative 1/2. So the graph looks like this. Is this okay? Do we need another one where I'm just changing amplitude and period, or are we ready to move up and down?
Move up and down.
Okay. Let's do... let's do -3 plus cotangent of 1/2 x. I put this on here because that's the way your book puts it. They put the -3 in front. On a test or quiz, I usually write it in behind. So what would the -3 do to this graph?
Move it down 3.
So amplitude, the coefficient of cotangent,
which is 1.
period. Normal period for tangent and cotangent is pi, divided by the 1/2, so we get 2 pi. Count by,
Pi over.
period divided by 4, so you get pi over 2. Interval. This time it's a cotangent. Where does cotangent start and stop?
0.
Okay, and in the middle we have our 1/2 x. So to get x by itself, we could take everything times 2. So this one's going to go from 0 to 2 pi. All right. So we're starting at 0, adding pi over 2 each time. So 0 plus pi over 2 is pi over 2. Plus pi over 2 is pi. 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi. We are going down 3 on this one, so how did we denote that in the past? So we'll go to -3 and put a dashed line there. So that's going to represent the center of my graph. All right, let's talk about cotangent. We pick this interval so that we don't have to find the asymptotes, we just know they're at the beginning and end. And in the center, you're at 0. So when at pi, I'm at my 0 point, which is the -3 here. Okay. Does cotangent increase or decrease?
Decrease.
Right, because it's starting out, think like this in quadrant 1, it would be positive, and as it goes, it turns negative. We start at our positive amplitude, so our amplitude is 1. So at pi over 2, we are 1 above the center mark. and 3 pi over 2 would be 1 below the center mark. And then it's just like tangent. You have a curve getting closer to your asymptotes as we go. If I asked for 2 periods, how would I make a second period here?
You do pi, like if it was normal, you do pi to 2 pi or 2 pi to 4 pi.
We just keep adding our count by for 4 more points. So if we keep adding our pi over 2, so this was 4 pi over 2, so 5 pi over 2, 6 pi over 2 is 3 pi, 7 pi over 2, and that would be 4 pi. And then you repeat this. So we start with an asymptote, you end with an asymptote. In the center, you'll be at your 0. Would be 1 above it and 1 below it. So it would continue the same way. So you could do another period. All right, let's try. I'm going to put one up here, and you guys see if you can list the information. Your amplitude.
2
Period.
pi.
No, it's just pi divided by the coefficient of x, which is 1, so you get pi. Count by
Pi over 4.
interval. Because it's cotangent, we set it up between what 2 things?
0 pi.
So this time we have to solve for x, so subtract your pi over 2, so you get negative pi over 2, positive pi over 2. And what is the one other thing going on this graph?
You're moving it up 3.
Did you guys get that information? So let's look at our graph. So if I start at negative pi over 2, adding pi over 4, so that would be negative pi over 4, plus pi over 4 is 0, plus pi over 4 is pi over 4, plus pi over 4 is pi over 2, which is our final point. Amplitude of 2, so we're going to go 2 above and 2 below our center, but where is our center at? 3. So I'm going to go to positive 3. Draw in that dashed line to show my center. So we'll go 2 above that will take you to 5, and 2 below it will take you to 1. Okay, we pick this interval so that we can say both ends are asymptotes. And in the center, it hits 0, which is positive 3. Okay, cotangent. What does cotangent normally look like? Increasing or decreasing? Decreasing. So we should start at our high point. So at negative pi over 4, we are 2 above. And positive pi over 4, we're 2 below. Worst case scenario, guys, if you ever got confused on those, you could go back and plug them into your equation and actually work it out and see what you get. So, that should look something like this. Questions on that? How do we feel in general? Do we need more, or do you think you're ready to try some on your own?
I think I'm good.
You ready? So I'm gonna have you guys do. We're not gonna do. So 1 through 7 is matching. Those really should not take a ton of time. You're looking at those and just asking yourself, okay, does it take tangent? Move it left or right, flip it. So think about your normal graph and what would happen there with your transformations. And then the rest of them are graphing. So list out your information.